Okay, should be live. Making sure YouTube is paying attention. Come on, YouTube. There we go. Okay, hello everyone. So today we're going to be taking a look at the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Like a lot of people, I think I know a little bit about this. I've spent some time looking into it. I think, like a lot of things, it's one of those situations where what I was told growing up is kind of an overly simplistic version of events, and things are a lot more nuanced. But I wanted to give some time today to I wanted to take some time to take a look at this issue because it's continuing even up till today, and it's very serious, and people are getting hurt. And I, for one, would like to understand what's going on a little bit better. I've pulled up a couple different documents here. I wanted to, a lot of these are going to be have some overlap, but I wanted to have some different sources. I'm going to start just with good old Wikipedia. I understand that there's limitations to Wikipedia, but in general, Wikipedia tends to be at least a good place to start, and they'll often link some sources for us. So we're going to start with this, and we're just going to go as long as we can. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take a quick water break. Okay, let me just make sure OBS is behaving. OBS is behaving. The history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began with the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. This conflict came from the intercommunal violence in Mandatory Palestine between Israelis and Arabs from 1920 and erupted into full-scale hostilities in the 1947-48 Civil War. The conflict continues to the present day on various levels. Background: national movements. Before World War I, the Middle East region, including the Ottoman Syria, the southern part of which are regarded as Palestine, was under the control of the Ottoman Empire for nearly 400 years. Towards the end of the 19th century, Palestine, which was divided between the Mutasarrifate of Jerusalem, Syria Vilayet, and Beirut Vilayet, was inhabited predominantly by Arab Muslims, both farmers and Bedouin, principally in the Negev and Jordan Valley, with smaller numbers of Christians, mostly Arabs, Druze, Circassians, and Jews, predominantly Sephardic. At that time, most of the Jews worldwide lived outside Palestine, predominantly in Eastern and Central Europe, with significant communities in the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and the Americas. The roots of the conflict can be traced to the 19th century, with the rise of national movements including Zionism and Arab nationalism. Though the Jewish aspiration to return to Zion had been part of Jewish religious thought for more than a millennium, the Jewish population of Europe and to some degree Middle East began to more actively discuss immigration back to the land of Israel and the re-establishment of the Jewish nation only during the 1859 to the 1880s, largely as a solution to the widespread persecution of Jews and anti-Semitism in Russia and Europe. As a result, the Zionist movement, the modern movement for the creation of a homeland for the Jewish people, was established as a political movement in 1897. The Zionist movement called for the establishment of a nation-state for the Jewish people in Palestine, which would serve as a haven for the Jews of the world, and in which they would have the right for self-determination. Zionists increasingly came to hold that this state should be in their historic homeland, which they referred to as the Land of Israel. The World Zionist Organization and the Jewish National Fund encouraged immigration and funded purchase of land, both under Ottoman rule and under British rule, in the region of Palestine, while Arab nationalism, at least in an early form, and Syrian nationalism were the dominant tendencies, along with continued loyalty to the Ottoman state in the area. Already sounds like a situation ripe for potential conflict. According to Benny Morris, among the first recorded violent incidents between Arabs and the newly immigrated Jews in Palestine was the accidental shooting death of an Arab man in Safed during a wedding in December 1882 by a Jewish guard of the newly formed Rosh Pina. In response, about 200 Arabs descended on the Jewish settlement, throwing stones and vandalizing property. Another incident happened in Petah Tikva, where in early 1886 the Jewish settlers demanded that their tenants vacate the disputed land and started encroaching on it. On March 28th, a Jewish settler crossing this land was attacked and robbed of his horse by Yehudi Yehudia Arabs, while the settlers confiscated 9 mules found grazing in their fields, though it is not clear which incident came first and which was the retaliation. The Jewish settlers refused to return the mules, a decision viewed as a provocation. The following day, when most of the settlement's menfolk were away, 50 or 60 Arab villagers attacked Petach Tikva, vandalizing houses and fields and carrying off much of the livestock. 4 Jews were injured, and a 5th, an elderly woman with a heart condition, died 4 days later. By 1908, 13 Jews had been killed by Arabs, with 4 of them in what Benny Morris called nationalist circumstances, the others in the course of robberies and other crimes. In the next 5 years, 12 Jewish settlement guards were killed by Arabs. Settlers began to speak more and more of Arab hatred and nationalism lurking behind the increasing depredations more than mere banditry. Zionist ambitions were increasingly identified as a threat by the Arab leaders in Palestine region. Certain developments, such as the acquisition of lands from Arab owners for Jewish settlements, which led to the eviction of the fellahin from the lands which they cultivated as tenant farmers, aggravated the tension between the parties and caused the Arab population of the region of Palestine to feel dispossessed of their lands. Ottoman land purchase regulations, certain developments, the acquisition from Arab owners for Jewish settlements, which led to the eviction of the fellahin from the land which they cultivated as tenant farmers, aggravated the tension between the parties and caused the Arab population of the region of Palestine to feel dispossessed of their lands. Okay. Ottoman land purchase regulations were invoked following local complaints in opposition to increasing immigration. Ottoman policymakers in the late 19th century were apprehensive of the increased Russian and European influence in the region, partly as a result of a large immigration wave from the Russian Empire. The Ottoman authorities feared the loyalty of the new immigrants, not so much because of their Jewishness, but because of the concern that their loyalty was primarily to their country of origin. Russia, with whom the Ottoman Empire had a long history of conflicts, immigrant loyalty to Russia might ultimately undermine Turkish control in the region of Palestine. This concern was fomented by the example seen in the dismantling of Ottoman authority in the Balkan region. European immigration was also considered by local residents to be a threat to the cultural makeup of the region. The regional significance of the anti-Jewish riots, pogroms in Russia in the late 19th and early 20th century, and anti-immigration legislation being enacted in Europe, was that Jewish immigration waves began arriving in Palestine, First Aliyah and Second Aliyah. As a result of the extent of the various Zionist enterprises which started becoming apparent, the Arab population of the Palestine region began protesting against the acquisition of lands by the Jewish population. As a result, in 1892, the Ottoman authorities banned land sales to foreigners. By 1914, the Jewish population in Palestine had risen to over 60,000, with around 33,000 of these being recent settlers. World War I and aftermath. As a result of a mutual defense treaty that the Ottoman Empire made with Germany during World War I, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers opposed to Great Britain and France. The possibility of releasing Palestine from the control of the Ottoman Empire led the new Jewish population and the Arab population in Palestine to support the alignment of the United Kingdom, France, and Russia during World War I. My brain did not pick up any of that. As a result of a mutual defense treaty that the Ottoman Empire made with Germany during World War I, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers opposed to Great Britain and France. The possibility of releasing Palestine from the control of the Ottoman Empire led the new Jewish population and the Arab population in Palestine to support the alignment of the United Kingdom, France, and Russia during World War I. In 1915, the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence was formed as an agreement with Arab leaders to grant sovereignty to Arab lands under Ottoman control to form an Arab state in exchange for the Great Arab Revolt against the Ottomans. However, the Balfour Declaration in 1917 proposed to, quote, favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, but that nothing should be done to prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, end quote. In 1916, the Anglo-French Sykes-Picot Agreement allocated to the British Empire the area of present-day Jordan, Israel, the Palestinian territories, and the area of present-day Iraq. The Balfour Declaration was seen by Jewish nationalists as the cornerstone of a future Jewish homeland on both sides of the Jordan River, but increased the concerns of the Arab population in the Palestine region. French imperialist influence and control, according to the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. French zone of influence. So here's Egypt, here's Gaza, British zone of influence, French, direct French control, direct... Okay, I see. Okay. By 1917, the British succeeded in defeating the Ottoman Turkish forces and occupied the Palestine region. The land remained under British military administration for the remainder of the war. When did World War I end? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. On January 3rd, 1919, future president of the World Zionist Organization, I think Chaim Weizmann, and the future King Faisal I of Iraq signed the Faisal-Weizmann Agreement, in which Faisal provisionally accepted the Balfour Declaration, conditional on the fulfillment of British wartime promises of Palestine being included in the area of Arab independence. At the 1919 Paris Peace Conference and Treaty of Versailles, Turkey's loss of its Middle East empire was formalized. Okay. Intercommunal violence in Mandatory Palestine before World War II. After World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, in April 1920, the Allied Supreme Council meeting at San Remo granted to Britain the mandates for Palestine and Transjordan, the territories that included the area of present-day Israel, Jordan, West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, endorsing the terms of the Balfour Declaration. In August 1920, this was officially acknowledged in the Treaty of Sèvres, maybe Sèvres. Both Zionist and Arab representatives attended the conference where they met and signed an agreement to cooperate. The agreement was never implemented. The borders and terms under which the mandate was to be held were not finalized until September 1922. Article 25 of the mandate specified that the eastern area, then known as Transjordan or Transjordania, did not have to be subject to all parts of the mandate, notably the provisions regarding a Jewish national home. This was used by the British as one rationale to establish an autonomous Arab state under the mandate, which it saw as at least partially fulfilling the undertakings in the Hussein McMahon Correspondence. On April 11, 1921, the British passed administration of the eastern region of the British Mandate to the Hashemite Arab dynasty from the Hejaz region, a region located in present-day Saudi Arabia, and on May 15, 1923, recognized it as an autonomous state, thereby eliminating Jewish national aspirations on that part of the Mandatory Palestine. The mandate over Transjordan ended on May 22, 1946, when the Hashemite Kingdom of Transjordan, later Jordan, gained independence. Palestinian nationalism was marked by a reaction to the Zionist movement and to Palestinian nationalism was marked by a reaction to the Zionist movement and to the Jewish settlement in Palestine, as well as by a desire for self-determination by the Arab population in the region. Jewish immigration to Palestine continued to grow significantly during the period of the British Mandate in Palestine, mainly due to the growth of anti-Semitism in Europe. Between 1919 and 1926, 90,000 immigrants arrived in Palestine because of the anti-Semitic manifestations, such as the pogroms in Ukraine, in which 100,000 Jews were killed. Some of these immigrants were absorbed in Jewish communities established on lands purchased legally by Zionist agencies from absentee landlords. In some cases, a large acquisition of lands from absentee landlords led to the replacement of the fellahin tenant farmers with European Jewish settlers, causing Palestinian Arabs to feel dispossessed. Jewish immigration to Palestine was especially significant after the rise of the Nazis to power in Germany, following which the Jewish population in Palestine doubled. I mean, just, God, emotionally, it's like you can understand why Jewish people would want a homeland of safety. At the same time, you can also understand why Arabs in the region wouldn't be happy about their land being taken away from them. So, God, history's complicated. The Arab population in Palestine opposed the increase of the Jewish population because the new immigrants refused to lease or sell land to the Palestinians or hire them. During the 1920s, relations between the Jewish and Arab populations deteriorated and the hostility between the two groups intensified. From 1920, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Mohammedan Amin al-Husani, became the leader of the Palestinian Arab movement and played a key role in inciting religious riots against the Jewish populations in Palestine. The Mufti stirred religious passions against Jews by alleging that Jews were seeking to rebuild the Jewish temple on the site of the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. The first major riots against the Jewish population in Palestine were the Jaffa riots in 1921. As a result of the Jaffa riots, the Haganah was founded as a defense force for the Jewish population of the British Mandate for Palestine. Religious tension over the Kotel and the escalation of the tensions between the Arab and Jewish populations led to the 1929 Palestine riots. In these religious nationalist riots, Jews were massacred in Hebron. Devastation also took place in Safed and Jerusalem. In 1936, as Europe was preparing for war, the Supreme Muslim Council in Palestine, led by Amin al-Husseini, instigated the 1936-39 Arab Revolt in Palestine, in which Palestinian Arabs rioted and murdered Jews in various cities. In 1939, Amin al-Husseini, who was wanted by the British, fled Palestine and took refuge successively in Lebanon, Iraq, Italy, and finally Nazi Germany. The British responded to the outbreaks of violence with the Haycraft Commission of Inquiry, the Shaw Report, the Peel Commission of 1936, the Woodhead Commission, and the White Paper of 1939. The Peel Commission of 1937 was the first to propose a two-state solution to the conflict, whereby Palestine would be divided into two states, one Arab state and one Jewish state. The Jewish state would include the coastal plain, Jezreel Valley, Beit Shean, and the Galilee, while the Arab state would include the Transjordan, Judea, and Samaria, the Jordan Valley, and the Negev. The two main Jewish leaders, Chaim Weizmann and David Ben-Gurion, had convinced the Zionist Congress to approve equivocally the Peel recommendations as a basis for more negotiation. Take a drink of water. Make sure OBS is behaving itself. OBS is behaving itself. Very good. The Arab leadership in Palestine rejected the conclusions and refused to share any land in Palestine with the Jewish population. The rejection of the Peel Commission's proposal by the Arabs led to the establishment of the Woodhead Commission. The Woodhead Commission considered three different plans, one of which was based on the Peel Plan. Reporting in 1938, the Commission rejected the Peel Plan primarily on the grounds that it could not be implemented without a massive forced transfer of Arabs, an option that the British government had already ruled out. With dissent from some of its members, the Commission instead recommended a plan that would leave the Galilee under British mandate, but emphasized serious problems with it that included a lack of financial self-sufficiency of the proposed Arab state. The British government accompanied the publication of the Woodhead Report by a statement of policy rejecting partition as impracticable due to political, administrative, and financial difficulties. In May 1939, the British government released a new policy paper which sought to implement a one-state solution in Palestine, significantly reduce the number of Jewish immigrants allowed to enter Palestine by establishing a quota for Jewish immigration which was set by the British government in the short term and which would be set by the Arab leadership in the long term. The quota also placed restrictions on the rights of Jews to buy land from Arabs in an attempt to limit the socio-political damage. These restrictions remained until the end of the Mandate period, a period which occurred in parallel with World War II and the Holocaust, during which many Jewish refugees tried to escape from Europe. As a result, during the 1930s and 1940s, the leadership of the Yishuv arranged a couple of illegal immigration waves of Jews to the British Mandate of Palestine, see also Aliyah Bet, which caused even more tensions in the region. Ben-Gurion said he wanted to, quote, concentrate the masses of our people in this country, Palestine, and its environs, end quote. When he proposed accepting the Peel proposal in 1937, which included a Jewish state in part of Palestine, Ben-Gurion told the 20th Zionist Congress, quote, the Jewish state now being offered to us is not the Zionist objective, but it can serve as a decisive stage along the path to greater Zionist implementation. It will consolidate in Palestine within the shortest possible time the real Jewish force which will lead us to our historic goal, end quote. In a discussion in the Jewish Agency, he said that he wanted a Jewish-Arab agreement on the assumption that after we become a strong force as a result of the creation of the state, we shall abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine. During World War II. During the 1936-39 Arab Revolt in Palestine, ties were being made between the Arab leadership in Palestine and the Nazi movement in Germany. These connections led to the cooperation between the Palestinian National Movement and the Axis powers later on during World War II. In May 1941, Amin al-Husseini issued a fatwa for a holy war against Britain. In 1941, during a meeting with Adolf Hitler, Amin al-Husseini asked Germany to oppose, as part of the Arab struggle for independence, the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. He received a promise from Hitler that Germany would eliminate the existing Jewish foundations in Palestine after the Germans had gained victory in the war. During the war, Amin al-Husani joined the Nazis, serving with the Waffen-SS in Bosnia and Yugoslavia. In addition, during the war, a joint Palestinian Nazi military operation was held in the region of Palestine. These factors caused a deterioration in the relations between the Palestinian leadership and the British, who turned to collaborate with the Yishuv during the period known as the 200 Days of Dread. Good God. After World War II, as a result of the British policies, the Jewish resistance organizations united and established the Jewish Resistance Movement, which coordinated armed attacks against the British military, which took place between 1945 and 46. Following the King David Hotel bombing, in which the Irgun blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, the headquarters of the British administration, which shocked the public because of the deaths of many innocent civilians, the Jewish Resistance Movement was disassembled in 1946. The leadership of the Yishuv decided instead to concentrate their efforts on the illegal immigration and began to organize a massive immigration of European Jewish refugees to Palestine using small boats operated in secrecy, many of which were captured at sea by the British and imprisoned in camps in Cyprus. About 70,000 Jews were brought to Palestine in this way in 1946 and 1947. Details of the Holocaust had a major effect on the situation in Palestine and propelled large support for the Zionist movement. 1947 partition. On May 15, 1947, the General Assembly of the newly formed United Nations resolved that a committee, United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, be created to, quote, to prepare for consideration at the next regular session of the Assembly a report on the question of Palestine, end quote. The committee was to consist of the representatives of Australia, Canada, Czechoslovakia, Guatemala, India, Iran, Netherlands, Peru, Sweden, Uruguay, and Yugoslavia. Water break. In Chapter 6 of the report of September 3, 1947, the majority of the committee proposed recommendations for consideration by the General Assembly that, quote, Palestine within its present borders, following a transitional period of 2 years from September 1, 1947, shall be constituted into an independent Arab state, an independent Jewish state, and the city of Jerusalem. The Arab state was supposed to comprise roughly 4,300 square miles and would contain a tiny Jewish population. The Jewish state was supposed to be roughly 5,700 square miles in size. It was supposed to contain a sizable Arab minority population. Neither state would be contiguous. Jerusalem and Bethlehem were to be put under the control of the United Nations. Neither side was satisfied with the partition plan. The Jews disliked losing Jerusalem, which had a majority Jewish population at the time, and worried about the tenability of a non-contiguous state. However, most of the Jews in Palestine accepted the plan, and the Jewish Agency, the de facto government of the Yishuv, campaigned fervently for its approval. The more extreme Jewish groups, such as the Irgun, rejected the plan. The Arab leadership argued that it violated the rights of the majority of the people in Palestine, which at the time was 67% non-Jewish and 33% Jewish. Arab leaders also argued a large number of Arabs would be trapped in the Jewish state. Every major Arab leader objected in principle to the right of the Jews to an independent state in Palestine, reflecting the policies of the Arab League. On November 29, 1947, the General Assembly adopted a resolution recommending, quote, to the United Kingdom as the mandatory power for Palestine, and to all other members of the United Nations, the adoption, and implementation, with regard to the future government of Palestine, of the plan of partition with economic union, a slightly amended version of the plan in Chapter 6 of the report of September 3, 1947, as Resolution 181, Part 2. 33 states voted in favor of the resolution, while 13 countries opposed it. 10 countries abstained from the vote. The Yishuv accepted the plan, but the Arabs in Palestine and the surrounding Arab states rejected the plan. The Arab countries, all of which had opposed the plan, proposed to query the International Court of Justice on the competence of the General Assembly to petition a country against the wishes of the majority of its inhabitants, but were again defeated. The plan, Part 1A, Clause 3, provided that, quote, independent Arab and Jewish states and the special international regime for the city of Jerusalem should come into existence in Palestine 2 months after the evacuation of the armed forces. The mandatory power has been completed, but in any case not later than October 1st, 1948. The approval of the plan sparked attacks carried out by Arab irregulars against the Jewish population in Palestine. Fighting began almost as soon as the resolution of November 29, 1947 was approved. Shooting, stoning, and rioting continued apace in the following days. The consulates of Poland and Sweden, both of whose governments had voted for partition, were attacked. Bombs were thrown into cafes, Molotov cocktails were hurled at shops, and a synagogue was set on fire. Arab gunmen attacked Jewish cars and trucks. Snipers in Jaffa began firing at passers-by in Tel Aviv, and Jaffa Arabs attacked close to Tel Aviv neighborhood. As the British evacuation from the region progressed, the violence became more prevalent. Murders, reprisals, and counter-reprisals came fast on each other's heels, resulting in dozens of victims killed on both sides of the process. The Deir Yassin massacre took place on April 9, 1948, when around 120 fighters from the Irgun Zavai Lamai and the Israeli Stern Gang Zionist paramilitary groups attacked Deir Yassin near Jerusalem, a Palestinian Arab village of roughly 600 people. The sanguinary impasse persisted as no force intervened to put a stop to the escalating cycles of violence. During the first 2 months of the war, about 1,000 people were killed and 2,000 injured. By the end of March, the figure had risen to 2,000 dead and 4,000 wounded. On May 14, 1948, one day before the British mandate expired, Ben-Gurion declared, quote, "the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel," unquote. The declaration was stated, quote, "by virtue of our natural and historic right and on the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly," unquote. The declaration stated that the State of Israel, quote, "ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, nation, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religion and will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations," unquote. The conflict. The termination of the British mandate over Palestine and the Israeli Declaration of Independence sparked a full-scale war, 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which erupted after May 14, 1948. On 15th through 16th of May, the four armies of Jordan, Syria, Egypt, and Iraq intervened in what had been the area of the British mandate, followed not long after by units from Lebanon. In the introduction to the cablegram for the Secretary-General of the League of Arab States to the UN Secretary-General on May 15, 1948, the Arab League gave reasons for its intervention, unquote. Quote, "on the occasion of the intervention of Arab states into Palestine to restore law and order and to prevent further disturbances prevailing in Palestine from spreading into their territories and to check further bloodshed," unquote. Clause 10A of the cablegram provided. Quote, 10. Now that the mandate over Palestine has come to an end, having no legally constituted authority behind in order to administer law and order in the country and to afford the necessary and adequate protection to life and property, the Arab states declare as follows. A. The right to set up a government in Palestine pertains to its inhabitants under the principles of self-determination recognized by the Covenant of the League of Nations as well as the United Nations Charter. While Arab commanders ordered villagers to evacuate for military purposes in an isolated area, there is no evidence that Arab leadership made a blanket call for evacuation, and in fact most urged Palestinians to stay in their homes. Assault by the Haganah on major Arab population centers like Jaffa and Haifa, as well as expulsions carried out by groups like the Irgun and Lehi, such as the Deir Yassin and Lida, led to the exodus of large portions of the Arab masses. Factors such as the earlier flight by the Palestinian elite and the psychological effects of Jewish atrocities, stories with both sides propagated, also played important roles in the Palestinian flight. The war resulted in an Israeli victory, with Israel annexing territory beyond the partition borders for a proposed Jewish state and into the borders for a proposed Arab state. Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt signed the 1949 armistice agreements with Israel. The remaining territories, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, were occupied by Egypt and Transjordan respectively. Jordan also annexed East Jerusalem while Israel administered West Jerusalem. In 1950, the West Bank was unilaterally incorporated into Jordan. Okay, I think I'm going to call it right there. My throat's feeling a little bit dry. I'm glad we're getting into this. It's a hugely complicated issue, and I don't think simple answers or simple takes is the way to approach it. Obviously, I think people of goodwill want peace in the region and want everyone in the region to live peaceful, safe lives. But it's good that we're digging into this and learning more about a complicated topic. Thank you for listening along with me today and reading along with me today. If you wouldn't mind giving the channel a subscribe, that would be really helpful to me. Thank you so much. I will catch you later.